Welcome to Mastering Money, the Educator's edition, where we talk about the latest in financial literacy education. I'm Doretta Thompson, Financial Literacy Leader for Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, where we provide no-cost programs and free online resources that help Canadians own their finances and learn the language of money. You can find our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, and wherever else you find your podcasts. Please do rate and review us. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us at financialliteracy@cpacanada.ca. Today I'm speaking with Peter Waitzman, manager of Money Steps Financial Fitness by day and YouTuber product reviewer Peter Von Panda by night. Peter's passion is the side hustle, which he believes can be life-changing, especially for those struggling with low income and job insecurity. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So tell me, before we get into the specifics of your experience, can you tell me something about the side hustle? Is that a rebranding of second income, or is there something really special about the side hustle that makes it a little bit different?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much a rebranding. And one of the things that I say is that depending on your generation, moonlighting, second income, second job, all those things really speak to the same thing. I think the side hustle nomenclature is just exciting because it's probably a bit more accurate. It's something on the side, and you actually do have to hustle. One of the things that I talk about is that a lot of people are trying to crack the code on passive income, right? No work, lots of money, Instagram life, sitting on a beach, feet up, and just money coming in. And that is really just not how it works, right? And so in some ways, we've gotten away from that. If you want more, you got to work more. You got to invest in the time that you have. A lot of us don't have other resources, especially when you talk about the vulnerable populations. So it's not the side lazy or the side passive. It is the side hustle. And so you do have to work. So I do like the fact that it's shifted to that term.
So tell me a little bit about how you started your own side hustle.
I have been a side hustler forever, and I just didn't realize it even growing up. I think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are looking for something to express themselves, some ways to do something outside of their 9-to-5 job. For me, it was even as a kid. I remember folding paper airplanes and selling them on the street and things like this. I've had a couple of entrepreneurial opportunities too. So I started a couple of companies, and those are really tough. And one of the things that I learned about that is that when I would talk to people, they were like, oh, you're a serial entrepreneur. And that's not really true. I really didn't have a passion for starting a business per se. It was just trying to solve specific problems. And one of the things that is often a problem for a lot of populations is making more money or expressing yourself and having an outlet for certain things, right? And so you don't have to set up a corporation to do those types of things. You can do those things as a sole proprietor, as an independent worker, contractor, those types of things too, and get really all the same benefits, regardless of the kind of the legal status. Since I have valeted cars, I can't even tell you how many things I've done before. I've valeted cars. I worked as a virtual call center rep in the evenings for my home. I sold insurance. I have detailed. Just the things that I have done are so numerous. I should probably go and list them out, but it's just an interesting path that all of those have been helpful in me getting my head around what are we trying to accomplish with side hustles? What are people generally trying to accomplish? And I think some of the reasons that people get into side hustles in the first place are not necessarily the reasons that they stay in them. And going through that journey and talking to other people and seeing the different things that are out there, I think are really interesting. And then I get to see the benefit in my day-to-day work to be able to convey those to people, work with people to help them understand what that looks like, get into it, see the impacts of it themselves, and then really pass that on forward. So it's really quite viral in that sense.
So what was the light bulb moment for you that this was something that was actually a powerful tool?
It's a good question because I know the light bulb moment. The light bulb moment for me was, and this is going to sound fairly mundane, is that at one point I was thinking about side hustles as being a minimum wage job, right? You're spending your evening loading boxes. And I remember I was doing a lot of these things, and especially when you take on a side hustle, even if you're a professional in your day-to-day work, you are not usually going out and picking up 5 to 8, 10 hours a week of work that is high level, right? You're not getting comped usually very heavily for it. In fact, when I did the virtual call center rep, I was making a decent income in my day job, but I was making $8.50 an hour US doing that work. And I remember thinking, which was very close to minimum wage at the time. And I remember thinking, if I could make more than minimum wage in a side hustle, I'd be really excited. Because then I would say that it's not just me going out and getting a part-time job loading boxes or flipping burgers or whatever, right? I am doing more than what I could do. And if I have that freedom component to do it when I wanted to do it, be my own boss, not have to report to someone, take time off, whatever, then I would really be in my happy place. And the advantage of that is when I was focused on that, when I hit it and I said, hey, I'm making more than minimum wage and I've got this freedom component, I was happy. That was all I was really ever trying to target at the time. And it was a little freedom money, which is what I call it, that discretionary money. You can go out. How many times had I gone out to dinner and I was thinking like, oh, I shouldn't order that. That's 27 in entree. This is 36 in entree. I'll go with the 27 and I won't order a beer or whatever it might be. And then with that additional freedom money, you get into that place where some of those littler numbers don't matter. And it's really freeing to be in a spot where you don't have to necessarily nitpick every expenditure. And that's really all I was trying to get to. And so once I got above minimum wage and I was bringing in a couple $100 a month in additional freedom money, where now go out, see a movie, do some other things, even repair my car or something without being stressed about it. Man, that was all I'd ever expected out of it, for sure.
Freedom money. I really like that.
Yeah. It's one of the things I say, it is getting an allowance as a kid, right? That is all freedom money, right? You don't have any bills. You don't have utilities to pay. If you get $20 as an allowance as a kid, that's all your money to go out and spend and play with. And as adults, we have that too. We just call it discretionary income, right? Or cash flow or positive cash flow. And so we make these large income numbers, but most of it is spoken for. And the reality is most people have very limited amounts of freedom money. When we talk about the low income populations, how much is there? Often zero, sometimes negative, right? And so if you don't have any of that freedom money, how can you expect to have any freedom mentality, right? You're always in that scarcity mentality. And that's really what I talk about in the power of the side hustle, is that if you can get to break even or get a little bit, as I was talking about, when I was at $100, $200 a month in additional income, and that freedom money is a huge mindset shift. That's really what I'm hoping for most people, is just to get them out of that kind of the getting by stage.
So how do you help people find their side hustle? Do all of us have a kind of inner side hustle?
So I have a big wheel and I just randomly spin it and then I sell them on it. No, it's a hard process. And that's why I think I've been in financial services for a long time. And that's one of the reasons I think as practitioners in this industry, it's really hard for us to do it. So there's a number of reasons. One, I don't think a lot of people, once you reach a certain place professionally, that you're really out there looking for your own side hustle, right? So it's hard to be a guide on it, as I say, or a leader or a mentor on it when you're not doing it yourself. And so in some ways, if you're an hourly worker and you drive an Uber part-time, or if you are starting out in your career and you work as a bartender part-time, so it's really hard to live by example if you don't have some of those yourself. And so that's one of the reasons. That's one reason. It's not the only reason, but it's one reason that I think that it's hard for practitioners sometimes in this arena, especially when you work for financial services companies directly who have been fairly well capitalized. A lot of times, especially if you're licensed in the space, it's actually very hard to go out and get side hustles because of compliance and public appearance and all sorts of other things. So you can't speak from experience in a lot of cases. The other big component, and I think this is the bigger component, is that you asked a great question, is how do you help people connect to their side hustle? There are limitless types of people, and there are limitless types of side hustles. And to take two huge nebulous populations and connect them is a really tough chore. And so that's one of the things that I'll talk about today a little bit, is some strategies on how to connect people, because I don't think it's very easy, but with a couple of kind of screening tools, I think you can help people get there. Now, the other thing I will say is that the beauty of the side hustle is you don't necessarily have to get it right? And you don't have to get it right early. As I just mentioned, I've been going through my side hustle journey for years and continue to look at other side hustles too. You're going to probably swing and miss at a bunch of these, right? They're just not going to be the right fit. Maybe it's timing, maybe it's the work, maybe it's your interest, and times change, whatever. And that's the beauty of it, is that you can boot one side hustle and get into something else and find your own journey. You don't have to get it right out of the gate. Perfection is the enemy of progress. And so I would say, try some things and you'll learn a lot from it. You'll learn a lot about yourself and what's out there. And then you'll be able to find something, I think, and hone in on it. So, and then everyone finds their own footing in different ways.
So what's the worst one you've ever had?
Oh my gosh. I've learned something from all of them. I bring up that call center one because that was tough, because it was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. And so you had to put in an 8-hour shift when you were doing it. And that's not actually unlike some other side hustles. If you're familiar with Instacart, what you actually have to do is you have to check in for a shift. It's a grocery shopping side hustle. It doesn't mean you'll be shopping for 6 hours, but you have to be available for those 6 hours. You're on deck, right? You're like the firefighter of groceries. And so that was a tough one because it was very regimented. And rewind a few years, the gig economy was not as mature as it is now, where you can do an hour or 3 hours or 5 hours, right? Companies had more, you were a contractor directly or an employee or whatever it might be. And so it was more rigid. Some of these require more training. They have more investment. And so that was just tough because that's a tough shift. It's a tough shift to get up and be ready for your day job in the morning and be energized and not caffeinated. So that was a tough one.
And what was the best one, or what is the best one?
For me, I have found, I think, my footing with YouTube, right? It's one of these things that I never expected it to go where it went. Over the years, it's really, in some ways, just carried me along for the ride. And it really works well for my creative needs, my desires for time flexibility, my income needs on that. It's really exceeded my expectations. Now, it's not the right thing for everyone. And so I do some things locally to my area where I call them YouTubers, where people are getting into YouTube, and we'll have some discussions. And I would say that the vast majority of people will try it and realize that it's not for them. One, it takes a long time to get ramped up. Secondly, you really have to want or be ready for public attention. You got to put yourself out there. That's not for everyone. I do skew a little introvert, but I can force myself to be extroverted. But some people just aren't that way. And it's not a bad thing. It's just I want people to not waste their time forcing themselves into something that's not sustainable. Because now if it becomes work, we already call everything else work because you have to force yourself sometimes to go there. So the beauty of the side hustle is this is your choice, right? You're volunteering to get into something. And so you might as well find something that you can really sink your teeth into and enjoy, because at the end of the day, you're the only one forcing yourself to go there, right? And so if it's work, you're going to lose that motivation. You're going to lose that drive. In some ways, I don't really care what you make or earn on it. What I'd encourage is find something that you enjoy. And if you enjoy it, then it doesn't matter if you're making $4 an hour or $400 an hour. It's going to be more sustainable.
So what are some of the most creative ones you've seen people come up with?
Oh man, there are so many. As I went down the rabbit hole of side hustles, I always was in the mindset of Uber. That's the one that comes to my mind. I think a lot of people understand it, right? I trade my time for money. And the reality is, I don't know that Uber would even be in the top of my list of side hustles I would recommend to people, because one, it's fairly saturated depending on where you live. The supply and the demand is, I think, equally balanced in most cases. And it's really it's trading time for money, and you have to put in effort. So depending on where people are and what they want out of their side hustle, I think there are some that are just absolutely incredible. Now, I would say that for the Canadian population, I'm not entirely sure, what's available. But in the US, they're one of my favorites right now, because the real estate market is pretty hot, is what's called a loan signing agent. And I'll even talk about it with our group today. But a loan signing agent is a third party that's required to be at house closings, contract closings, real estate backed mortgage security or mortgage contracts. So if you're getting a mortgage, you're refinancing, you're getting a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan, what they require is this third party. It's essentially a notary that's going to be there to observe the transaction and sign off on that. Everyone there had their proper ID. They signed the right forms. They signed to the right spot. And it pays about $100 for that third party role. So you're not the mortgage broker on it. You're not the representative of the bank. You might have to answer questions like, what is this affidavit or whatever it might be. But generally, that is a pretty good way to spend your time. So it's really the Uber of real estate closings. And it's one of the gentlemen that came to a side hustle presentation of mine locally ended up becoming one. And so we've caught up about it. One of the nice things about it is that, especially if it's like a home equity loan or line of credit, which can be like a 20-minute closing, can be very short, you still get that $100. So you get a much bigger pay factor than you would doing an Uber or an Instacart. Now, nothing against those, but I think those are already in like the vernacular for people. So I think those are the ones people think about, kind of task type of side hustles, but there are just a ton of really awesome ones. And if you're really creative, you can build your own side hustle, right? If you are on social media and you have an outlet for marketing your own products, a friend of mine launched her side hustle called Rustic Graves Candle Company, something like that. And she basically creates soy candles at home and then sells them on Etsy, I believe. And so this is her side hustle. And it's not something, she's not inventing a market space or anything, but she's also not contracting and relying on a second or another company to broker a product and market it for her. So she has to own it front to end. But in that way, she's totally in control of it in her future. Lots of just creative stuff. You can be very creative on the side hustle world. And try it out. And it's so easy and so inexpensive to start something up these days. Between a website and Facebook page and stuff like that, you can get up and running with an idea by tomorrow and prove it out, right? Prove the concept.
I think it's very interesting about things like how quickly some of these opportunities get saturated. I saw some data recently that percent of Uber drivers are on the street with nobody in them. And it's one of those examples that they're now using as the Cobra effect, where, exactly the opposite of what you wanted to do turns out, because it actually, instead of taking cars off the road, it's actually put more cars on the road, which is a kind of interesting phenomenon.
Unintended consequences. I totally agree. And that's probably where I would encourage people to really think creatively and do a little work, because I think the ones that pop to mind are often the ones that are already saturated, right? They're the ones that the real money has already been taken out of. Now, I'm not saying don't do them, right? Because in Chicago, you can still drive a car, you can still make money with an Uber or Lyft or ride sharing. Absolutely. And that's a great way to plug the gap financially for some people, or to bridge themselves between jobs, or to put some extra money on the table. I don't dog that at all, because I think it's really noble and there's an awesome opportunity like that. But I would say that some of the ones out there that aren't creative are some of the most lucrative ones too. Babysitting apps, dog walking apps, you can put in less time, make more money, and have flexibility with it. You can make $100 in an evening babysitting, right? And you don't have to drive anywhere or put any wear and tear in your car. And so in some ways, I think some of the old reliable has been overlooked as well. Some of the things that, when I was growing up, I used to have this Honda lawnmower, and I would just go to all my neighbors and charge $20 to mow their lawn growing up. And that was great. It was how I made some extra money, and it was a lot of work, kept me in shape as a kid. But you don't have to overthink it too. There's an app, Plows and Mows. There's a lot of ways that you can go out there and take some of these old school, high need, reliable tasks and turn them into money in a way that's a lot easier than it was what I was doing as a kid, sending out, putting flyers in mailboxes and all that kind of stuff.
That's a really interesting point, actually. I know that for the period of time that I lived in the suburbs, there were no kids that you could hire to cut your grass or babysit, or it had become quite a lot more challenging than it used to be. I remember when I was a kid too, like everybody did that. Everybody babysat, you had a few regulars. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, there was even a story about a young kid, and I think I'll have the numbers completely wrong, but his father paid him like a nickel to take the garbage from the garage door down to the curb in the mornings once a week. And so what he learned is that now I could make a nickel taking a can from the garage door down to the street curb. And so he went to all the neighbors and said, hey, on a garbage day, I'll bring everyone's can. And so he's only making 50 cents or $1 a week. But it was just, I think you're starting to imprint that idea of how the market works, right? How you can leverage your time for money.
What are the 3 most important things that someone's considering a side hustle?
The one thing is that it's going to be work, and it's going to be work, especially at the beginning. And I think people sometimes underestimate that. If you are an Uber driver and you have 1,000 rides under your belt and you have a good rating and all that, right? That's a different place than someone who is starting out. Becoming an Uber driver now is not as easy as it used to be. Now you have to have a car inspection. You have to pass background check. I think some places require fingerprints, whatever it is. You're going to have to figure out how to keep your car clean, right? You're going to get over this hump. And so I think everyone underestimates the idea of what it takes to get into something. For me, in my professional work, we work with a lot of people who are struggling financially. And one of the things that I've heard, and I've said this before, is that I've had people that have been in tough places financially, and I've said, hey, maybe you should think about extra income or increasing that income pie. And a lot of the comments, I've gotten this from multiple people, is, if it really gets bad, I'll go stock shelves at Home Depot. And I'm always wondering, what is this Home Depot shelf stocking rule that they can't fill? I've never gone to Home Depot and been like, man, the shelves are just empty. And if only they could find someone to stock the shelves. So I don't know that Home Depot is having a problem with that. So I think in some ways, people are a little cavalier in what is available, what they think is available, and how easy it will be to get there. And then to me, the other thing that I want people to realize is that I don't care if things are tough now or if they're okay right now. If you're thinking about a side hustle, guess what time is the best time to get working on it? It's now, because, and I can't speak specifically about here, for the area in Chicago and the US, the economy is very strong. People are spending money. I spend money on Grubhub to order food or Instacart to have groceries shop. I don't think that exists forever. The cycles of the economy are unpredictable. They absolutely will cycle, right? We'll go from growth to recession at some point. Markets will get tighter, money will get thinner, consumption will go down. And guess what happens, I think, at that point is that people that were thinking or on the fence about a side hustle will say, now I don't have a choice, I need a side hustle. But guess what happens at that point? Just like you mentioned about Uber, now you've got a flood of people out there trying to find places to make money. You've got fewer people spending money. And so now you have this perfect storm of now when people are forced to go into it, it's too late. And so probably the second thing I would say is I would experiment with it now, right? You don't necessarily need to dedicate a lot of time. I don't care if it's a couple hours a month. Most people will have that. If anyone turns on the TV, they've got a couple hours a month. I would try something, get your feet wet on it, get some experience with it. If it takes off, great. If you have a few customers that really like your babysitting services or your lawn mowing services, great. Those are customers that will hopefully persist with you when the markets turn. But if you're going to wait, have you been watching this Popeye chicken sandwich debacle, right? The Popeye chicken sandwiches are sold out everywhere. So everyone's going crazy for them, right? There's a black market for them. People are fighting and cutting in lines and all this other stuff. It could be the same thing on the side hustle world where, hey, I need to make minimum wage to augment my income or I lost my job, right? You don't want to be in the position where you are fighting a million other people to do that. My first job out of college, I got laid off in the dot-com crisis of 2002. And guess what? It was really hard to find a job at that point because there were millions of other people just in my metropolitan area also looking for jobs that were very similar to the work I was doing, right? And guess what? It drives prices down because the supply is so high. You don't want to be in that spot. So that's why you don't know what's going to last too. So you want to get out there, try it, get your foot in the door now. It's going to be a lot easier than trying to figure it out later. And the last thing I would say too is be very aware, and this is always a tough one, self-awareness is always a tough one, of what you're trying to accomplish with it. I think that there is a problem with people thinking of outcomes that maybe are unrealistic, right? The sitting on the beach, Instagramming your life and making millions of dollars as an Instagrammer, I think are generally behind us. And if you're not doing it now, I'm not saying anything's impossible, but I think it's going to be really tough, right? There are only so many Kylie Jenners of the world and those types of things. So what I think is take a look at what your needs are. And if it's to plug an income gap or to start getting ahead or start putting a couple bucks into a retirement account or start investing or whatever it is, what is the need that you're trying to fill and what kind of side hustle can help you get there realistically? I would not recommend YouTube for someone who's trying to fill an income gap right now, or even in the next few months or 6 months or 1 year, to be really honest. I just don't think it's going to generate income relative to the amount of effort you put in a short amount of time or even a short-ish amount of time. But you can do that with babysitting this weekend, right? You can go out and babysit all Saturday night and bring in $100 and that's going to help next week. There are apps that you can download right now, get registered, start doing work and get paid tomorrow, right? So there are a number of things. And so you just want to marry up what you need with the side hustles that will get you there. It's a little oversimplification, but I think people have pie in the sky sometimes, right? I'm going to start a business. I'm going to be a real estate investor, whatever it might be. Those things are very different types of side hustles than I think most people need.
Thank you very much for that. Something that we ask everybody who stops by to visit. There's a lot of people who get involved in the financial literacy world, the financial capability world, trying to help others have a reason that they got there. And often a story of bad financial decisions that they have made in the past and what they learned from it. Do you have any stories you'd like to share?
Yes, let's take the next few hours and share the stories I've learned. I think one of the stories that I learned is that life is not a motivational poster. I think that there are a lot of things that we just throw out there as absolutes. And if you do them, if you do X, Y will happen. And life is, to me, what I say is it's ground out in the middle. For a lot of us, you're not going to go to a presentation by a billionaire and become a billionaire, right? There's a lot of us that are middle class, be happy with it, right? This is where most people are going to end up. And I think that it's overlooked sometimes what seems very mundane, right? And the side hustle is in many ways super mundane because it's saying, hey, yes, as a professional, I've worked with people on how do you get ahead in your career, right? Prepare yourself for the next job, do constant education, training, take on key projects, whatever it might be. And those are all great. I love them, right? But they're also no guarantee that you're going to rise to C-suite level executive or make a lot of money and those types of things. And to be really honest, I think what is undersold is the reality that most people don't want that, right? Most people want this work-life balance. This is very hot right now of having a life, having a job where you're in flow, having the life you want, which means not necessarily overdoing it in any one thing. And I think the side hustle allows you to flex to that. It allows you to find your comfortable space and maybe take up that free time if you have it, to the point where, hey, I'm making some money, I'm not overextending myself, those types of things. And so you can be very happy in the middle. And that's what I tell people, is that doesn't necessarily mean not be ambitious, right? Or try to get the next promotion or jump jobs for that promotion or opportunity. But I think that there is often, and I think a lot of us in the personal development space, we try to cultivate this space of want and desire, and that's not unhealthy, but it becomes unhealthy when it's always on the horizon, when it's always beyond your reach, right? And that people don't focus on the here and now enough. And so what I want is people to take the time to enjoy themselves, not defer a lot of things. Even today, I'm going to talk a little bit about regret, because I think what we have is a lot of pause or delay, like in life, because of finances, because of life timing, whatever it is. And so what ends up happening is that it ends up catching up with us in a lot of ways, that people say, geez, I wish I had done this. I wish I had visited that friend. I wish I had taken that extra meal. I wish I'd taken the extra day off and spent the holidays, or hopefully avoid those regrets later in life. That's really what I'm talking about, is really be present too. Like I said, ambitious, but also present. There's balance there.
This has been another episode of Mastering Money, the Educator's Edition, brought to you by Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email is financialliteracy@cpacanada.ca. You can subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes.